second by Ann Casey. All those in favor say aye. Okay, that carries 7-0. Our presenter tonight is Patricia Magnuson, our new Director of Business Services, officially coming online next month, but we are delighted that you're here with us tonight to walk us through this documentation. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Waters, Superintendent Osai, board members, and community members. This is the school board's public hearing for taxes payable in 2019. This presentation is designed to inform our taxpayers about the school district budget and the tax levy in compliance with Minnesota state law, which requires that school districts hold a public meeting on the proposed tax levy with very specific timing requirements and very specific content requirements. And you can see those there on the slide. In order to accomplish the state requirements, tonight's hearing agenda will include background information on the district's fiscal year 2019 budget, along with actual financial results for last year, fiscal 2018. This will be followed by information on the district's proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2019. And at the end of the presentation, the public will have the opportunity to provide comments. The Minnesota State Constitution includes the duty of the legislature to ensure that there is an established system of public schools. And the local property tax levy is one of the mechanisms that the state legislature uses to fund public education. So as a result, public school funding is highly regulated, and revenue formulas, tax policy, and the tax levy process are all established through state law. A key point about the tax levy is that increases or decreases in the local levy do not necessarily translate into school district budget changes. State-determined formulas and voter approval create the limits for the tax levy. Some increases are offset by reductions in state aid, and expenditure budgets are limited by and established through separate processes than this revenue-producing process. An increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an increase in expenditure budgets. In contrast to cities and counties whose fiscal years coincide with the calendar years, school districts are on a different cycle. So our fiscal year begins on July 1st and runs through June 30th. So tonight's tax levy discussion is for taxes payable in the tax year 2019. And that creates one source of revenue for next school year, which is the 1920 school year. And that budget will not be adopted by the board until June of 2019. So the budget we discussed tonight will be this current year's budget, which was adopted by the school board last June, in June of 2018. And these are all the budgets within which the school district, funds within which the school district has a budget. And only 3 of those budget areas actually have a tax levy. That's the general fund, the debt service fund, and the community service fund. This is a chart that shows actual fiscal year 2018 year-end results, and it also has the fiscal year 2019 adopted budget. This is a required publication. You'll see it in a local newspaper. That's still required, that it be published in a local newspaper, and it's also on our district website. And I included here to be sure that we cover the requirements that the budget and last year's actuals are covered. But we'll go just into a little bit of detail about the budget. This is a pie chart that shows St. Louis Park Public Schools' projected revenue within all of your funds. The total budgeted revenue for fiscal year 19, the year that we're in, is over $86 million. So I'll provide a little bit of detail on that biggest part of the revenue pie, which is the general fund, and that's about 77% of your total budget. This chart shows the revenue sources within the general fund. And as we saw on the previous slide, that's about 77% of the total revenue for the school district. This fund, the revenue in this fund comes from 4 main sources. The biggest one being state aid. That's about 66.7% of the total general fund budget. And then property taxes is the second largest source at 27.8%. The green section is the third, and then the other sources like grants make up the remaining 5.5%, so a smaller portion of the budget. So it's mostly a state aid and property taxes fund in the general fund. There's a couple of slides then that break down expenditure budgets in two different ways. This first way of looking at the expenditure budget is by program. And you can see that most expenditures directly support students. So it's either in regular special education or vocational instruction. It's in instructional or pupil support areas or in pupil transportation services that really directly impact students. This second way of looking at that same expenditure budget is by what we call an object code. So it really looks at more the way that the category that funds are spent in. And the projected expenditures by object category indicate a really typical pattern for school districts. Over 80% of the budget pays for staff, the salaries and benefits of our employees who deliver services and support our school district operations. Education is a people-intensive business, so this is a very normal pattern for school districts, as you well know. Now from the budget, I'm going to go on then to talk about the tax levy. As just a little bit of background understanding, every owner of taxable property pays property taxes for various taxing jurisdictions in which their property is located. So there's county property taxes and city property taxes, and the school district is just one of those areas. So each taxing jurisdiction sets its own tax levy, and it's often based on limits within state law. The county, which is Hennepin County in our case, sends out the tax bills, collects the taxes, and then distributes the funds back to the taxing jurisdictions. And we are one of them in the school district. This is a sample of a parcel-specific notice that's sent out by Hennepin County. And again, the school district is just one of the taxing jurisdictions. There's lots of others that impact a property owner's taxes. For the school district, we may levy for about 40 different categories of levy items, and the limits are set either by state law or by voter approval. And the Department of Education calculates those detailed dollar amounts. Back on September 24th, you went through the details of that preliminary levy, and those were set on September 24th. So this is the schedule of events that established what came out on parcel-specific notices for taxes payable in 2019. So tonight, we're on December 10th, and we'll hold this public hearing, and then the board is scheduled to take action later tonight to set the levy. So state law requires that we explain reasons for major increases in the overall levy. The total proposed levy for St. Louis Park Public Schools is increasing by 2% over 2018. It's a very modest increase. These next two slides show some line item details. These documents themselves are also included in the packet tonight for when the board takes action later, so you may not be able to read them here. I'll go through some of the larger line items. There's really three areas that make up the majority of that 2% increase. It's the operating referendum, which is a voter-approved item, the capital projects referendum, also a voter-approved item within the general fund, and then the lease levy, and we'll talk about those a little bit. So there's the general fund on that page, and this page shows the community service fund and debt service, the only three funds that have tax levy as one of their revenue sources. So for instance, you don't see food service here. There is no tax levy for food service. So here's some of the larger line items that have changed within the general fund. The first being the voter-approved operating referendum. Its change is $250,000, and that's just a change due to the inflationary adjustment that's built into the calculation and was approved by the voters. The inflationary adjustment was 2.06% for this year, and that's calculated by the Department of Education. The second line item I'll talk about is the capital projects referendum. That increases because a tax rate is what was approved by the voters, And so as the tax rate increases, it's a tax rate applied to adjusted net tax capacity. So as the property tax, the property wealth in the school district rises, that tax rate is applied to a growing property tax base. And as happens with this type of levy, that the dollar amount will grow. So the calculation is based on 3.812% of adjusted tax capacity. So a growing tax capacity will generate growing revenue. This is commonly referred to as the technology levy. So that's what that revenue source is about. The final item in the general fund I want to talk about is the instructional lease. This line item went up by $185,000. This is all attributed to, this change is attributed to the lease for the district office space. Then we'll jump over to the debt service levy. There were not, the community education fund did not change, so I'm not going to talk about the changes there. I can certainly try to answer some questions in that category. In the debt service fund, this is really the established principal and interest payments for bonds that the school district has issued. And so this increase of $230,000 is the scheduled principal and interest on voter-approved levies or voter-approved bond issues. This second one is a little tricky to explain sometimes. It's a reduction of $202,000 for debt service excess. And you likely know that school districts are required to levy over 100% of what is necessary to pay the principal and interest payments, and that accrues into the fund balance, cannot be used for anything else, but for paying debt service. And the reason that's required is that sometimes there are unpaid taxes or delinquent taxes, and the mechanism is in state law to make sure that we can make principal and interest payments. So as that dollar amount builds up in fund balance, the Department of Education makes a calculation, and we must pay back to the voters the excess balance. And so there is a reduction in taxes in this category, or in the levy in this category, because we have a fund balance, as is likely to happen, because our principal and interest payments are what we levy for, but we must levy an increased amount. So that's a reduction line item. So the dollar levy is increasing by about 2%, but there's other things besides the dollar amount of the levy that will change someone's property taxes. It could be a change in the individual parcel value of the individual property owner. That can change the property tax of an individual parcel, and the property value of an entire district. As it grows and changes or reduces, that can also impact an individual property taxpayer's tax bill. So I'm going to show you a few graphs that exhibit what likely happened for taxpayers in St. Louis Park Public Schools for just a few example categories. And this is, again, only the school district portion of the property taxes. We won't be talking about the other taxing jurisdictions, cities, and counties. So all of these examples are based on a 16.9% increase in property value from 2016 to 2019. So you're going to see several years. And for this last year, it assumes a 6% increase in an individual property value. So an individual property will be more or less. It just depends on, there might not have been an increase at all in an individual's property value. And all of these examples were prepared by our financial advisor, Ehlers and Associates. So just so you know that. This is a little bit of a complicated table, but I just want you to look over to the right-hand side, and you see there's mostly negative numbers. So it would not be I wouldn't be surprised if the tax bill for school districts went down for many of our property tax owners. Our property owners. This assumes a 6% increase in an individual value. The tax rates are going down in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And if you think about the way a tax rate is established, the numerator is the tax levy, the denominator is the property value. The tax levy on top is only going up by 2%. The property value in St. Louis Park went up by over 8%. So if we do our math, the rate's going to go down. So our tax rate is going down. And a property value, an individual property value would have to go up by over 8% for the taxes to go up. So it would be, I would not be surprised to see school district portions of property taxes going down based on that information. I can take a look then at a few individual valuations. So for instance, this first on the left property shows a home, a residential home that might be valued at $150,000. And again, this assumes that that value is up 6% from what it would have been last year. And for that home, the school district portion of property taxes went down from $614 last year to $608 this year. While minor, a reduction in property taxes is always welcome. So that's $6 of a decline. The median value home in the school district is about $276,000. And that's according to Hennepin County. And again, that home will have experienced an $18 reduction in their property taxes if their home went up by 6%. Now, there's all kinds of calculations that might change. There's a couple other examples here just for illustrative purposes. $500,000 residential property would have a $44 per year decrease. And the last example is a commercial industrial property, so it's an apartment building. A $1 million valued apartment building would have a nearly $100 decrease in school district property taxes. So the next steps are that the board will accept public comments about the budget and the tax levy, and then later this evening, we will certify the levy for taxes payable in 2019.
You have a question, Jim?
Oh, just because someone asked me recently, do you know off the top of your head what percentage of taxes are paid by businesses?
I do not know, but I bet I could track that answer down. I do not know the answer.
Just one note as we're talking about public comment, the board and the superintendent did receive an email today from a resident talking about the property taxes and the increase that this homeowner has seen over the last couple years. The homeowner did note what Patricia just noted in terms of the different buckets that it's taken from, and just advised prudence when it comes to our decision making. So I thought I would note that we did receive that today, and that person could not attend this evening.
Patricia, I just want to say welcome.
Thank you.
And then I just thought, I'm so grateful to have someone who can explain this to me in a language I can understand. And I think you did the best explanation I've ever heard about the rate versus the property value and how that impacts your taxes. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone within the seating area who has a public comment about this levy hearing?
Is that up here?
Hello. I just had more of a question. Trying to come in here. Do I need to go on this microphone? Sorry. Just more of a question that I had on where I can try to find information on kind of some of the different bucket spends. Really curious about the capital investments buckets and kind of what we're doing in the 2019 calendar year. I know there were some flyers that came around on money that we might be spending for expansions in different of the schools. Curious if we have, as a board, like a 3-year long-range plan on what some of those ideas might be and how we would find some of that information, would be my first question.
We did have a really comprehensive process as part of our strategic plan. Facilities was one of our strategies. So we convened a task force of residents, experts, staff, teachers, students, I'm trying to think if there were over 40 people involved with that process as we made a determination to present different options to the board, where we settled on the $100.9 million ask of the community on last fall's ballot. All of our questions passed at a very high rate, 84% in one interest, in one example, over 80% in the other. So what our community has told us is, yes, you made the case that we do need to invest in our facilities and that we are taking a careful, prudent approach to doing that. I wish Tom Bravo, our facilities manager, were here. He does an update every single month, and if you go to our district website, there is a tab about our facility projects. And part of it is all of our buildings are old, and we hadn't kept pace with the investments that we couldn't do it in one go 10 years ago when a lot of districts were suffering with financial issues. So things got put off. And at some point, you just really have to make those investments so that you can have the facilities that are going to support what we call next century learning. So that's kind of a snapshot of how we got to that number. Do you have any other specific
Sure.
questions?
No, I'm in favor of spending more on the infrastructure. I'm just curious if that, and you kind of alluded to the website might have some of those projects that the school district's working on this year, and maybe as they look at the out years, what some of those projects might be.
I can help. I'm Sarah Thompson. I'm the Director of Communications for the school district. On the district website, there's a tab under About Us that has all of the facilities information on it. You can view a timeline, you can view the projects by school, and that's where we update the information as it changes throughout the project. With all things in construction, and especially with buildings who are the ages that ours are, things change. And so as we're moving through the process, which will be now through 2022, we'll be adding information to the website and updating the community and all the stakeholders as we go through the process.
Okay, great, thank you. And then can you tell me, how do you go about allocating the capital project funds? Is that something that we do multiple bidding for the construction, or can you speak to kind of what the financial policies would be in order to make sure that we're getting the best use of the taxpayers' dollars on those investments?
We have to by law. There is a very prescribed manner in which the construction documents are created. There is a bidding process. Our architects and construction management firm implement those for us on our behalf. And again, is that part of the timeline too, Sarah?
The bidding's not included on the timeline, just there's different pieces of when, the bids go in different packages based on the best advice of Tom and our construction manager. They're bundled in different ways at different times. But I could provide that information if that's a level of detail that you're interested in.
And I can add, all of those bid awards come through the board for approval, so over the course of the construction project timeline, you'll be able to go back and to archive meetings and get access to the information that you're looking
Okay,
for.
perfect, thank you. I do project management, so I get excited about that type of work, so. And the only other comment that I would say is, I saw the graph on the percent increase with most of the taxpayers taking a deduct. When I went to the St. Louis Park County, or city rather, meeting, it looked like that was a smaller percentage, so I do feel like most of the people are in that bucket of higher percent increases this year. I know myself, I fall in the 25% increase range across all the buckets, so it's my bad year, I guess, on the house assessment. That being said, I do think when I was at the city, I heard a lot of more angry people, I think, directed to that meeting than this. I do think I like seeing the investment into the school. I wanted to come today and tell you, I think it's always good to spend the money. I think at 2% is probably not even enough. I'd be willing to pay more as a taxpayer. My kid's just coming around to daycare, but I'm hoping that by the time she comes into the school district, that it's a growing school district and continues to bloom. So keep up the good work on the spending and making St. Louis Park a place to be. So thank you.
Yeah, Ann?
Could you tell us your name?
Sure. I'm Greg Cummings.
Greg, thank you for being here, and thank you for being excited as a project manager. That's awesome. And just thank you for coming, because you're the only one who came to make a comment, and it's really important, so thank you.
So, seeing no one else needing to make commentary, we can adjourn this portion of our meeting. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by Mary Tombeck. Is there a second? Second by Jim Beneke. All those in favor say aye. That carries 7-0. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your time, Patricia, and thank you, Mr. Cummings, for speaking forward.